Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's BBE webinar. I hope you're all doing well. It's been a busy old week here at BBE. We've had several projects getting off the ground. So we're pleased to be back for our regular Thursday evening slot. So as usual, before we get started, I'm just going to introduce to you some of the features of Zoom, as there's new people every week. Who join us for the first time. So without further ado, here goes. So before we get started, if you could set up your sound and microphone, just in case you're one of our questioners today or that you're joining us in the BBE pub later on. So to do that, in the bottom left hand side of your screen, just click on the audio settings and then click on test speaker and microphone. That way it gives you a chance to have a look at that. It gives you a chance to test your microphone and your screen and things like that. So next up, putting your hand up. So if you are with us on the Zoom call, you're able to put your hands up. If you test that for us now, you stick your hands in the air. I can see it running up for those that have joined us on there. That just allows us to ask you quick questions, find out how you're doing, what's going on, whether you're understanding what we're talking about. And then next we've got the chat box. So this is in the bottom right hand corner of your screens, and you can use this just to have general chit chat, ask us very quick questions or make relevant points at the time that they're happening, and you can either address that to all panelists, so that's me and the team from BBE who are working away in the background, or Philip, or you can direct it towards attendees or even individuals if you're having a conversation. But don't use that for asking questions, really. The best place for that is in the Q&A box. So this is at the bottom of the screen, and you can use this to ask a question which is held there until Phil is ready to spend some time going through the questions. And then questions that we answer will be available there once we've answered them as well. So you might be able to pop in there and see what other questions people have asked. So that's the ask a question. For those that might not be aware of Brass Bands England, we are the membership organisation for brass bands. So if your band's not a member, maybe you want to check out what we've got, you can visit us at bbe.org.uk. We do everything from advocacy for you. So recently we've been doing advocacy with Public Health England in the COVID crisis, but we've also raised the face of brass bands in Westminster with the Boppers, as well as things like, in a normal year we run the youth championships, and we offer the safeguarding training as well. So there's plenty there for people if you would like to find out more about Brass Bands England. This week we have launched our new competition, the Brass for Brass competition, or I don't know why that jumped on. So this is a new free monthly competition where all you have to do, fill out a very quick contact form, and then at the end of the month we draw a winner, and then each month after that you'll just get one email that says click here to enter the competition. You click that link and you'll be entered for that month. The clever part is that the more you enter, the more you have a chance of winning. So for the second month that you enter, you'll get 2 entries. And the prizes there are a good little haul. Not only could you win your band's membership of BBE, there's a voucher from band supplies for yourself and subscriptions to both Brass Pass and British Bandsman up for grabs as well. So to enter that, all you need to do is go to bbe.org.uk/brass-entry for the entry form. So please do go ahead and enter. It's absolutely free, and the more people from your band enter, the more chance you've got of winning. So tonight, we've had our quick introduction there, and in a moment, I'm going to hand over to Philip Harper, whose session today on how to lead a great rehearsal. something that I know Phil's very passionate about. Then about 8:30, or sometimes we're a little bit later than that, we'll do some feedback and have a wrap up. And then at about 9:15, we'll open up the BBE pub. And that's when we say goodbye to those of you that are watching on Facebook, and make everybody that's on the Zoom call a presenter, and you're then able to switch on your webcam, your microphone, and we have a good old chat about what we've just been learning about, and other things in the brass band world. And it's a great chance to open a drink and just have a chat with some like-minded people. So without further ado, I think Philip Harper is with us on the line. Hi, Phil.
Hello. Hi, Alex. Thanks very much. How are you doing? I'm well, thanks. Yeah, how are you? You enjoying lockdown?
Yeah, although I could really do with a haircut.
Yeah, I was going to say that, but too polite. You said it yourself, though.
Yeah, I did remember to go and give it a comb before we came on.
Right. Well, good evening to everyone who's attending this webinar this evening. Thanks very much for coming along. And I'm delighted to be back here and invited by Brass Bands England to deliver another session for you. It's been 3 or 4 weeks since I last came on here, and obviously the sort of COVID lockdown conditions are changing slightly. Not so much in the UK, but for me, it was really fantastic just at the weekends to see a concert, a live streamed concert given by the Wrong Brass Band, RONG, which is a championship section band in Norway. Norway is, I don't know if we've got anyone from Norway joining us tonight. I know people come from all over the world, but Norway is a country, obviously, which is several steps ahead of where we are in the UK. But nevertheless, as a brass band fan, it's just fantastic to see players once again sitting in the same room as each other, interacting with each other, performing wonderful music, and for the wonderfulness comes from it being live for me, and just to see players kind of enjoying themselves collectively playing is yeah, just heartening to see, really. So yeah, little signs that things might be getting back to normal, but for now, here we are again online with an online webinar. As Alex said, the title of the webinar this week is How to Lead a Great Rehearsal. So I'm mainly addressing something to conductors. And I'd first like to just, with a show of hands, just so I can gauge who we've got here in the virtual room. Can you put your hand in the air, please, if you are a conductor who, after the lockdown, has a band to go back to and begin conducting immediately? Can you put your hand in the air if you are in that position? Oh, the numbers are shooting up there. You can see the numbers this week, Alex, so this is great. So 38, that's on at the moment. That's probably 70-80% of you. Okay, thank you. What about if you're a player? Any players in the room who aren't necessarily conductors but are curious about conducting and maybe have conducted once or twice but don't have a regular gig? 5 of those. Who's everyone else then? So the third category is just going to be other or miscellaneous. That probably that's gone down now. Perhaps I can't see it properly. Anyway, we've got,
I think there's a few people that haven't put their hands up.
Ah, right. Okay. The shrinking violets. That's fine. It's good to see that there's a fair few conductors with us then, because this will be mostly relevant to you, although I hope of interest to everyone, really. The thing I would see this particular presentation with is how to lead a great rehearsal. What I'd really like is to have a band in front of me so I can not only talk to you in theory about it, but actually demonstrate in practice to you exactly what I'm talking about. Obviously, conditions don't allow that, which is a bit of a frustration. So do feel free to query anything I'm saying. If it's not clear, then you know, I'm not able to demonstrate, but I am able to address questions that you might want to put in the chat and what have you, from a practical point of view, if I'm not making myself clear. Okay, so let's get started. I will share this with you. Okay, is that working? So the first thing I'm going to do is actually do a recap. Some of you might have come to the last webinar I did about a month ago, which was more to do with the basics of conducting and something about conducting technique, as in stick technique as well. And so I'm going to start tonight's webinar by just doing a summary of that session and actually starting with the very last slide I had from that session, which summed up. And then this one, as I said at the time, will then continue immediately from that. So this is where we were last time. Oh, I've got to do this every time, have I? Right, we ended with a little sequence of points, how to be a conductor. I suggested there were 4 aspects of this. Number 1, to be a conductor, you really need to feel something deep inside you. You need to feel an inner drive, the passion, some kind of impulse to actually want to conduct, and some kind of musical vision as well, which you can act on. Secondly, I suggested in the last session that another prerequisite of being a conductor is to enlighten yourself or to educate yourself. So that you make an effort to learn all about music, so you know about music theory and about music history, and you know, you have a knowledge of repertoire, for example, that sort of thing, and also about others' interpretative work as well, because as a conductor you are an interpreter, and it's all about that, the art of taking what someone's written on a page and turning it into something living and breathing, and that's the art of interpretation. The third part of that was to learn some stick technique. In other words, how as a conductor you're going to make your gestures, what movements you're going to use with your hands. I suggested that this was best done in front of a mirror, which is how I did it when I was learning my stick technique over the course of about a year, so regular sessions in front of the mirror. Well, I'm really old, so there wasn't really such a thing as video recording when I was learning how to do this. But these days, video recording is probably even better than in front of a mirror, because of course you can rewind, you can slow motion, you can pause, all kinds of different aspects of that. But nevertheless, stick technique was the first technique that you need to learn. I brought in a quotation from a famous British conductor, Sir Thomas Beecham, who was rumoured to have said, conducting, he thought, is the only job you can learn in an evening, in one evening. And I think what he meant by that was the actual technique of waving your arms around in a 4-beat pattern or a 3-beat pattern or a 2-beat pattern is very, very simple. And that's pretty much all you need to be able physically to do as a conductor. And so if you look at it simply in terms of baton technique or stick technique, it's really straightforward. And he reckoned it's the only job you can actually learn in an evening. I think he's been a little bit flippant there, but you get the idea. And finally, and this is where I left it last time, I said the last thing you want to be doing is applying for a job. In other words, to actually take your theoretical skills and experience and knowledge as a conductor and actually bring it to life, put yourself in front of a real group of people and start learning the hard way. So that was as far as we got in the last webinar. And I want to start with a new material by going back to talking about an artistic process. Now, every webinar that I've done so far with BBE, I've talked at one point or another about some kind of artistic process that happens. And this, the graphic I put on the screen for you now, is essentially, in my view, what the artistic process of conducting actually consists of, and I hope this will kind of inform what I'm going to go on to talk about in a minute. So there's the conductor in the middle there. And in my view, the conductor at first should get an idea in his or her head of what the ideal sound should be, by which I mean, what is the ideal performance of this piece, or what is the ideal tone quality of this passage, or what is the ideal speed for this piece. This is the first part of the process. It is for the conductor to start developing these thoughts and visions about how things will turn out, what the outcome will be eventually, what the perfect outcome would be, the ideal. So in other words, what it should sound like eventually. And as I've said, every time I've spoken about the artistic process on other webinars, this part of the process is actually carried out alone, using the conductor's imagination. So, I mean, sometimes you can get advice and help from other people, and you can ask people to clarify certain points, or, you know, ask for their opinion. But essentially, this part of the process has to happen up here, in the conductor's brain, in the conductor's imagination. And of course, well, I say of course, let's take that out. It has to happen before rehearsal starts, before your interaction with the group begins. That's the first part of the process. So the second part of the process then is this. So we go from the ideal, which is in the conductor's brain, to the real. In other words, when you get to rehearsal and you go 1, 2, 3, 4, what actually comes to your ears? What's the sound like at that particular moment, the real sound? So what it actually sounds like. Unless you are extremely lucky, it's not immediately going to sound like your ideal vision of it is going to sound. If it does sound like that, then you simply put your baton back in the case, close it, and go home, and your job is done. But I've never experienced that, and I don't think anyone else has either. So the implication is that once you've heard the band or the group playing in front of you, then you have a version of events which is real, which is this is what it actually sounds like, and you then have that version of events to compare with your ideal version of events. And the idea is, as the rehearsal goes through and makes progress, or as a series of rehearsals go through, as a period of time goes through, maybe 10, 12 rehearsals go through, basically you listen to the real version of what the piece sounds like. And I've highlighted that in red because I'll come back to this a bit later on, but listening is such a vital skill to conducting. In my opinion, the most important skill of all conducting, listening. So over the course of this rehearsal or period of rehearsals, you listen to the group in rehearsal, and then this process happens. You listen, you communicate what you want to say at various points, and little by little over that time, what's coming to your ears in reality should slowly start to sound like your vision, eventually what your ideal vision is, to a greater or lesser extent. Obviously, I am talking in idealistic terms. That's why I'm using the phrase ideal. But nevertheless, you can see the point I'm trying to make there, which is that the process that I'm advocating here is that the conductor has a vision in his or her head, and then they go in front of a group of people, they start working with the reality, and all the time they're chipping away and just trying to develop that reality so that eventually when it comes time to perform, or whatever the outcome's going to be, that the performance is as close to that ideal as it can possibly get. So that is, in my view, just the top level kind of artistic process of conducting as far as I see it. Now, this webinar is particularly about rehearsal technique. And strangely, I mean, I've seen a lot of conductors, very well-known, famous conductors, give workshops, masterclasses about the art of conducting. And in 99% of cases, I would say the content is purely about stick technique. So if a student conductor is on the rostrum, for example, and conducts a piece of music, orchestral piece or a band piece or whatever, choral piece, then after a while, the maestro will step in and say, oh, no, why don't you try, you know, reaching a bit further for your third beat or for your upbeat or what have you, which is fine. But for me, and one thing that I hardly ever see, and this is why I think I'm very passionate about this, is, in my opinion, baton technique and stick technique is, of the two techniques you need to be a competent conductor, is by far the least important. The way you wave your arms around, it certainly is important, but it is, in my view, it pales into insignificance compared to your skills in rehearsal technique, how to actually do a rehearsal. You know, in my view, when you're working with amateur bands especially, it doesn't really matter how many centimeters to the right your third beat is, or, you know, what your right eyebrow's doing when you're doing an upbeat or what have you. It doesn't really make that much difference. But what does make a huge difference is if conductors can gain a competence and a skill and an experience in rehearsal technique. Now I'm gonna share a little video with you to explain what I mean about the great masters, because I've got this nice little video again from Sir Thomas Beecham, who's the conductor whose quote I shared with you a second ago. This is Sir Thomas Beecham's idea of what rehearsal technique is. So have a listen to this. I hope this is going to work. Here we go. Right, here we go.
There's only one way to rehearse an orchestral piece, which is what I do.
What's that?
I take either a Mozart symphony or a Strauss tone poem. I play the whole thing through, beginning to end, without a stop. The whole blessed thing. The orchestra makes a few mistakes, naturally. I play it through a second time. The orchestra makes no mistakes. I then just take a few little difficult parts. I pinpoint them. I emphasize them. I repeat those 3 or 4 times. I really perform.
That's it. Was everyone able to see that? Can you just raise your hand if you had trouble seeing that? Raise your hand if you couldn't see that. Just one person. So 58 people successfully saw that. Well, so it's available on YouTube, that little video there. So Thomas Beecham there basically giving his opinion on rehearsal technique, which is play the piece through once, group makes a couple of mistakes, play it again, group makes no mistakes, rehearse a couple of little bits, ready for performance. So that is maybe why you don't see rehearsal technique really kind of talked about or commented on when you're looking at masterclasses from the great maestros, you know, the great conductors, because in their world, when they're working with top quality orchestras or maybe even just professional musicians, you could say that, then that is the technique that you use for rehearse. There's no kind of assumption there that it's the conductor's job to kind of do any training of the musicians in any way, which is something that obviously we do have in the world of bands as well. So yeah, that's by way of starting, really, is just to give you that view from a conductor who is a million times more famous than I am, and that's Thomas Beecham and his ideas. Right, let's move back to my screen share. Yeah, we've seen that. Right, okay. So the way I see it, there are 5 aspects to good rehearsal technique. Okay, and here is what they are. Look on the screen now. Number one, plan, 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 and plan. The only way you'll start off by running a great rehearsal is to have a great plan. There's no two ways about it. So perfect preparation prevents pretty poor performance. And I'm talking about the performance of the conductor in rehearsal. And so that's sort of a paraphrase of the well-known saying. So plan, 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 and plan. This part of the process is done, as I've said earlier in the artistic process part, is done at home and prior to the rehearsal starting. Okay, I'm going to drill down in more detail into each of these in a minute, so I'll go pretty quickly through these. That's the first part of a good rehearsal. Second part, when you're actually in front of the band, it's really important for a great rehearsal that you make a positive start. Vital. Jedi mind tricks are in operation as soon as you enter the building, and even before, and I'll tell you what I mean by that a little bit later on. So that's the second part. Make sure you make a positive start. Third part. Now this takes up the majority of time during a rehearsal. So for the most part, you'll be doing this. Every rehearsal, really, when you boil it down, is basically an exercise in problem solving. So I'll talk to you about various kind of issues and problems that may come up. But basically, if you were to unglamorize the whole thing, because rehearsal's really, really glamorous, isn't it? But let's unglamorize it. Then it's basically just solving a series of problems one after the other. So there will always be a multitude of problems. Some, I would argue, can very much be predicted and can be headed off in the planning stage of things. Others come up in the moment of rehearsal. So, you know, however the problems present themselves, it's my view that you need to take a sort of methodical and pragmatic approach to solving those problems for it to result in a great rehearsal. That's number three. That's the majority part, number three. Number four, once you finish rehearsal, then similarly to making a positive start, you need to make a positive end. And you know, even on the worst rehearsals, you can usually send people away believing the rehearsal wasn't as bad as it actually was by being positive in the sentiment you finally leave them with. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about that later on as well. Because everyone wants to go home satisfied in some way, of course, don't they? This is their hobby after all. And then the final part of leading a great rehearsal is what happens after the rehearsal's finished and before you start planning for the next rehearsal. And that's reflection. Very, very underrated, really. But in an ideal world, what you should be doing is using your reflection on what actually happened in that rehearsal to kind of inform your plans of what's going to happen or what your plans are going to be for the next rehearsal. And in my opinion, it always helps to record the session because, of course, your memory is not the truest record of what happened. So if you were trying to achieve something and you want to really kind of drill down into how it actually panned out, then having either a video recording or an audio recording of the rehearsal is absolutely key to a useful reflection. So those are my 5 pointers for a great rehearsal. Okay, number 1, planning. Number 2, once you get to the rehearsal room, make a positive start on rehearsal. Number 3, understand that you're in a process of problem solving. Bam, 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 methodical. Number 4, end the rehearsal in a really positive way. And number 5, then, don't overlook doing your reflection on the rehearsal and then feeding that back into the plans that you make for the rehearsal that follows. Okay. Right. So I said I'm going to drill down into each one of those. So let's do that right now. So number one, planning. Now, on the previous slide, I said plan, 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 and plan. And again, I can't really overemphasize the need for good planning for a good rehearsal. You just, I mean, you're just not going to get a good rehearsal if it's not well planned. So first of all, score preparation. This is one of the three things which I think you need to take care of when you're planning. Whatever music.
Do you want to run the poll at this point?
What was the first poll? Have I missed it already?
About when you do, where you do your rehearsal planning.
Oh no, not yet. No, that's in a minute.
Sorry.
I'm still on it. It's a couple of lines away, so I've got it in my mind. Thank you anyway. Right, so yeah, score preparation. Whatever music you're working on, you as a conductor, you will have a score which shows you what everyone is supposed to be playing. It depends what you've got on the agenda. Whether you're working for a concert, you might have several scores. If you're looking at a contest, you might have a single score with more detail on it. Or it may be that you're looking at doing some more kind of general training exercises. If you've got a younger band or a less experienced band, you might do some warming up exercises or some kind of drilling or hymn tunes or something like that. But you will have a document which I'll call the score, and it's absolutely vital that the conductor knows that score better than the players do. Now, the players obviously on their stands only have the individual parts, so it's the conductor's obligation to make sure that they have prepared the score. They know what's on all of the parts. They know how the parts relate to each other, how they fit together, how the dynamic structure works, where the challenges are at any one point, which players are being challenged more than others at any one point. Though that kind of knowledge about the score. And if it's a more complicated score, then also idea of the conductor's interpretation as well. So it might not be a simple kind of abstract exercise in playing from the top of the page to the bottom, but there might be certain interpretative and stylistic things which the conductor will need to have in his or her head or marked on the score before they start. So that's the first part of the planning, is this preparation of the score, the physical, the paper score, the scores you have in front of you. You need to have looked at them, you need to know them, you need to understand them before you attempt to start rehearsing them. Now that might sound a very obvious thing to say, but I've seen too many rehearsals where at 7:30 the rehearsal starts, the conductor opens the first page of the score, and it's clearly the first time that that page has ever been opened. So score preparation. Number two, rehearsal timings and objectives. Okay, now I write these down all the time in a planning book. This is my real life planning book. Hasn't had anything written into it for quite a few months now, but nevertheless, all of my rehearsal plans go in here. Now you won't be able to see the detail, obviously, on the screen, I don't think. In fact, let me just stop sharing. It might help. So this is my rehearsal book here. These are the sort of things that I have in my rehearsal book. Little scribbles, basically. So it's only for my benefit, but just a list of the pieces that we're going to do. Some are quite detailed, like that. That was a rehearsal that we did for Titan's Progress on the 9th of October last year. So it's quite a detailed plan. Other rehearsals, look at that rehearsal there, for example, 22nd of August. It basically just has a list of 4 pieces. So, but the point is that there is, my plan is always there, or right, it's generally there. It's either there or it's in there. But the point is, there is a plan. I guess that's the point, isn't it? So before I talk in a little bit more detail about that, let's run the poll now, Alex, shall we? So the question is, where do you do your rehearsal planning? Is it on paper, like I've just shown you there? Do you do it in your head? Do you do it in a variety of places? I mean, some of you might use technology to do it on a tablet or something like that. Some of you might do it on the back of an envelope. Or the fourth option, I don't plan. These are anonymous polls, Alex, aren't they?
Yes, they are. Yeah.
All right. So don't be afraid of putting I don't plan if you don't. I'd like to hear the truth. So how's that looking, Alex? Looks like I can actually vote in this one.
Oh, sorry, we've got about 54 people voted, so we'll close the polling there.
Yeah.
Share the results. There you go. For those that are watching on Facebook, they can't see these poll results. So if I read them out, so on paper we had 51%. In my head, 27%. A variety of places, 22%, and one very honest person, I don't plan, 2%.
Okay, good. Well, I hope whoever that person is, thanks for your honesty, and I hope by the end of tonight's session, I might have changed your mind on that. So yeah, this is my planning book. Like I say, what I write in the book, I'm just putting on the screen for you now. It's really pretty simple. It's just the name of the piece that we're going to be rehearsing, how long I'm going to spend on it. So I just usually write 20 minutes or 30 minutes. I've seen some people do plans. In fact, sometimes I do it myself, where you actually at the top of the page you start 7:30 and you actually note the time that you're aiming to move on to the next piece. So 7:50, I'm going to be moving to the next piece. So the name of the piece, how long you're going to spend on it, and what's the objective. Now, this is not as simple as writing the name of the piece or how long to spend, because of course there are a million objectives that you could possibly set. But here's some example objectives for you, just to give you an idea of how tight or loose this might be. The objective of playing a piece might be as simple as to play the piece through a few times to familiarize the band with it, because you've never played it before. And that might be all you want to do in one rehearsal, is just kind of get that piece into people's subconsciousnesses and build up that familiarization. I mean, that's, you know, not particularly targeted objective, but it is an objective enough for you to deliver that rehearsal. So that could be an objective. Or it could be something a lot more specific. So for example, you might work on a particular piece and your objective might be to get people to synchronize their dynamics at letter B. Maybe in the conductor's assessment, it's been a little bit ragged and people getting louder and quieter at different times. So your objective that you'd write down might be for people to synchronize their dynamics. Again, now that's quite a specific objective as opposed to the previous one, but it doesn't really matter whether it's general or specific, as long as you've got in your mind the reason that you're actually rehearsing something. That's a no-no, really. Don't play something in rehearsal with no reason for rehearsing it. That's the idea of kind of forcing this thought before you get to rehearsal. Sometimes when you're approaching a concert, you might have a different objective. Again, the objective might be to get to as close to perfect a rendition of the whole piece as possible. So in other words, your rehearsal is not going to consist of stopping every time something goes wrong. Your rehearsal is going to consist of playing the piece through maybe 2 or 3 times, so that your band can get an idea of what it's like to perform the whole thing in context. You know, that is as valid a rehearsal as any other. Or for example, if you've got a beginners group or a youth group or something like that, the rehearsal might be as basic as, I want to try and get from C to G without the ensemble breaking down. I just want to get continuously from C to G without it grinding to a halt. That also is an objective. So don't think that you know, objectives need to be really, really lofty. They need to be realistic and achievable. And I've got, if I flick through my book again here and just look at some of the objectives that I've got for myself. I mean, this was the 22nd of April last year. figure 3, top cornets are out of tune. So my objective is to fix the tuning. At bar 30, the vibraphone plays too soon and it's not together. Well, obviously the only reason I know that is because I've recorded the rehearsal and I've listened to it back. So my objectives are really quite specific just through there. Whereas the other page that I showed you, which just had the 5 pieces on, that would have been a rehearsal which was basically just running through pieces to familiarize the band with them. So hopefully you can see how I use a variety of kind of objective settings to write in my book. So that's the second aspect of planning which you need to take care of, the rehearsal timings and objectives. And remember, this process is happening not in the rehearsal room, but way before you get to the rehearsal room, at home, in your car. Well, no, not in your car, because you need to write something down. Forget the car, forget the car. It happens before the rehearsal in any case. And so the third part of that is practical considerations for the rehearsal. Okay, so practical things that you as the conductor need to be thinking about, be one step ahead of, to make sure that your rehearsal runs smoothly. Personnel, I know this is a big one from some of the questions that you've already sent in. Is someone going to be late or missing? There's no point planning to start a rehearsal with a piece that's got a massive baritone solo if you know your baritone player's had a flat tire and he or she's not going to be at the start of rehearsal, for example. That's quite an obvious example. But it may be that someone's missing from rehearsal completely that night, in which case it's part of your job as the conductor to change the plans to make sure that that is catered for. Music, I'm talking about sheet music. If you plan to rehearse a particular piece and it hasn't been handed out, or if you plan to rehearse a piece and, I don't know, the timp part has been lost, or something like that, then it's incumbent upon you as the conductor to know that, to understand that. So if you've got a band librarian, I mean, at Cory, we've got a band librarian. He knows that on a Monday and Thursday lunchtime, he's probably going to get a call from me, so that I can check that, you know, the right music's in the pads at the right time. And if we've got any new music coming out, that's available. And, you know, I talk about things that are coming up in 2 or 3 weeks' time as well. That's the conductor's job. And if I'm not doing that, then I'm basically jeopardizing the chances that I'm going to have a smooth running rehearsal. So music, equipment, that's another one. I mean, percussion is obviously a big thing. There's no point saying, right, we're going to start rehearsal with the national anthem and cueing a snare drum roll to find that the snare drum's in the cupboard. And so again, at Cory, I generally have a conversation with my principal percussionist before rehearsal, and I'll say, and this can usually take place when I walk into the room, and I'll just have a whisper in his ear and say, we're going to start with this piece or what have you, and he can get the section set up. But it could easily just be a simple text message or something like that. But again, it's incumbent upon the conductor of the band to make sure that these things have been thought of. Other issues as well. I mean, you'll tell me as many issues as I can tell you about what can spring up at the last minute to jeopardize rehearsal. Will the building be unlocked, for example? I mean, that's one that, you know, I've had a number of times. Are there particular traffic problems at the time that people are, you know, trying to get down the high street? Have they put temporary traffic lights up on, or something like that? I mean, you know, it seems like a sort of a wide-ranging brief, doesn't it? But if you're really concerned with planning your rehearsal properly, then you'll kind of be over these aspects of the planning. Okay, so those are the 3 aspects of good planning, in my opinion. Number 1, score preparation, so that you know the content of what you're going to be rehearsing. Number 2, rehearsal timings and objectives, so that you're in control of the resource of time. Basically, a rehearsal is 2 hours or 1 hour or however long it is. And as the conductor, you need to manage that time. And number 3, practical considerations, you know, whether the mutes are available, or, you know, a plethora of different things which might need troubleshooting. Okay. I'm just going to dip into the Q&As because there might be a few that are relevant to what I'm talking about. Mark Arnold has put a question. In planning your rehearsal, if you give a piece 20 minutes, but after the 20 minutes of rehearsal, you're just getting into the nitty-gritty of it, would you stop? In other words, would you stick to the plan, or would you go with the flow in the room? I mean, the answer, that's a very good question, and one I'm asked a lot. And the answer is you need to, the plan is absolutely not set in stone. It needs to have some flexibility in it. But if I suggest if you've allowed 20 minutes to rehearse a piece, and after 20 minutes you're right deep in the nitty-gritty, then that management of time is something that you probably need to have a look at. It's either a, you know, the skill in predicting how long things are going to take, because things generally take longer than you think they're going to take. So you need a bit more realism in the planning. But yeah, I mean, the answer is the plan is not set in stone for sure. So you need to kind of go along with the flow of what's happening in the room. In fact, I can see a lot of people asking that question. Yeah, a lot of people asking exactly that question. Okay, thanks. Right, let's move on. So the second part of my delivering a great rehearsal, if you remember, was now you're arriving in the rehearsal venue. So you've done all of your planning, and that's written in your book or wherever. And now it's all about getting the rehearsal off to a positive start. So the first thing that I recommend is that you set a good example. Again, this might seem obvious, but when you enter wherever you are rehearsing, whether it's a classroom or a band room or a community centre or whatever, make sure as the conductor that you are on time. Make sure that you are industrious. In other words, you know, you're busy and you've got energy, you're enthusiastic. Make sure that you're happy, make sure that you're in a good mood. Okay, sometimes you might need to do a bit of acting for this to happen, but again, I think if you want a great rehearsal, you've got to take care of these things. Make sure you walk into the room with an open mind. In other words, make sure you go into the room or the building, or get out of your car, or wherever you want to quantify this from. Make sure you do that in exactly the same way that you want your players to approach the rehearsal. Because as the conductor, everyone knows the hierarchy which is there, and people will follow your lead. So even if this is a very subconscious level, if you are doing all of these positive things and you are always on time, you're never late, and you're always well prepared, and you're always smiling, and you're always positive, this will rub off, definitely. Number two, make sure that at the beginning of rehearsal, you plan to take care of a warm-up and a focus. So a warm-up is like a physical warm-up, so that the player's embouchure, has blood flowing in it and the fingers are working properly. And the focus part of that is more mental, the mental preparation. So two areas that you really need to take care of in your planning. Most people, as we know, are coming in to a band practice from their other lives. So they're coming straight from work, for example, let's say, or they're coming from a family, they just dropped the kids off at a babysitter's and they're coming from a family situation. There's a million different places people are going to be coming from. And probably their mind and their brain is still going to be in that place at the beginning of the rehearsal. So it's the conductor's job to bring that focus to the table. So most people, including myself with most bands, will plan to do like a hymn tune, a warm up with the hymn books. And there might be some focused objectives for your hymn playing. For example, to play the first note together. Now, some of you might be hearing me say that and thinking, well, that's a bit straightforward, isn't it, to play the first note together? And that's kind of exactly the point, really, which is that it really, sometimes it really pays dividends when you've got people whose minds are thinking about, oh, did I put enough cat food out for the cat, and have I set the TV to record EastEnders or whatever? To actually give them something which is very easy to discern musically, whether something goes da, or whether something goes da 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 da, i.e. together or not together, just really kind of helps them to open their ears and focuses them on something really, really simple. Also focuses them on breathing as well. Ooh, this is where I really, really would much prefer to have a band in front of me. I could show you exactly what I meant. So that might be your objective for playing the hymn tune. You might spend 5 minutes just making sure that people are playing the first note together. Or the objective might be to play through the entire hymn tune without you, the conductor, being aware of anyone breathing. I mean, that leads to slightly wider discussions then about dovetailing breathing, about breathing in less obvious places than after bar 4 and bar 8 and what have you. So again, it's quite a simple thing, but it just leads the players into this kind of area of music and away from all of those other distracting areas. And it brings everyone onto the same page together. And this is one of the roles of the conductor, is to bring everyone together onto the same page. So that objective can help with that. Again, spending 5 minutes doing that. Or you might want to talk about an awareness of sound quality or tuning. Now, these, in my view, are much higher level things to be talking about. So these would really only apply to kind of higher level bands, in my view, is to something that you would start talking about off the bat at 7:30 on a Monday or a Thursday night. But nevertheless, they might be appropriate for your band. In my view, the best thing the conductor can aim to do at the start of rehearsal is encourage the players to start listening. And I've mentioned that word before this evening, and on pretty much every other webinar I've done. The skill of listening is for me anyway, the single most important skill to developing yourself as a musician. And I'm talking about conductors and players as well. So I think it's very, very, it's a very important role for the conductor to impress upon all the players how important it is for them to listen to each other. And just doing this basic kind of training through the hymn tunes is a brilliant way to focus, concentrating on the ears and listening to the other people in the room and developing those band skills. You can do the poll on the hymn tune, Alex. This is probably going to be the most controversial poll that you've ever had on any BBE webinar. So if you've got the question there. Are you there, Alex? Oh, there we are. What's your favourite hymn, everyone? Yeah, I couldn't.
Flying in at the minute.
Excellent. I couldn't think of any more controversial question than this. You've got to pick one off this list, right, Alex?
Yeah, you've got to pick one out of the 5 most well-known hymns that we've got. For those on Facebook that aren't able to see it, people have to choose between. Now, the first one, Blanwen. I can never know how you say it.
Yeah, carry on. I'm looking forward to the third one.
Eventide, Hyfrydol, St Clement, and Sandon.
Okay, that's Hyfrydol is probably what I would have said just before I started conducting in Wales, but now I say Hyfrydol, which sounds a bit sort of Welsh Indian.
And the first one that must be Welsh as well.
I think that's just Blanwen, but perhaps our Welsh participants can correct us on that.
Right, most people have voted now, so if I close those polls,
let's see.
Oh, 1 second. I nearly relaunched the voting. So we've got 26% for Blanwen, 25% for Eventide, 19% for Hyfrydol, 17% St Clement, Sandon 13. So Blanwen for the top spot. I'm surprised.
Very, very tight at the top, wasn't it? Well, Blenwyn's a great hymn because it's actually twice as long as most other hymns. So you've got twice as long as a conductor to listen to things and assess things. And it's in a beautiful, beautiful, rich key as well. I think it's in it's in A flat, I think, isn't it? Cornets are playing in A flat. So it's a really nice kind of warm flat key. Right. So there we go. So yeah, I'm sure most of you will use hymn books on a very regular basis. Let's go back to my screen share. So that's the warm up and focus part of this positive start, which you're going to make on rehearsal. And now let's imagine that you've now taken your place in the middle of the band and you've tapped on the stand. Silence ensues. You're lucky, and I know that's something we're going to talk about a little bit later on. I mean, my best advice to you is just say something positive as your opening sentence. Look up, look at the band members right between the eyes. Don't look down at your stand to make your opening gambit. You need to be as engaging as you possibly can be right from the start. So come up with something. It can be spur of the moment, or you can plan it, whatever, but it has to be something positive, or even just hello and a smile is fine. That's it. But again, it's a subconscious thing. But if you're positive in your first opening gambit to the band, then that gets what is going to be a great rehearsal off to a really good start. And people are already warming to rehearsal if you can come up with something positive. And then to get to the last part of how I think you should be starting a rehearsal, it's really important that you get everyone engaged immediately. Everyone in the room has to feel that they are part of this rehearsal right from the word go. And I would say that that means as a conductor, you need to consciously play whatever piece you're playing for at least 3 minutes without stopping. And whether that means you do a verse or two of a hymn tune, that's fine. Whether that means you get onto your main piece after the hymn tunes and you do 3 minutes of that, that's also fine. The point is you need to get everyone involved. That's gone off, hasn't it? And engaged in the rehearsal. If you've got loads of plans you want to get through, resist the urge to start implementing them all immediately. You might be able to hear a million things that are going wrong. Resist the urge to say anything. Let people play for at least 3 minutes at the start of rehearsal, and then they feel as if, you know, they're in the game. Don't play for 10 seconds and stop and then start rehearsing something with an individual player. It's the worst thing you can do. 95% of people switch off. Alex, you want to interrupt, don't you?
Only to say, at the end of this section, let's have a short break for a comfort break. It doesn't need to be bang this minute. So finish the section.
Yeah, this section's finished.
Oh, okay, great. So I'll we're going to have a very short break now, folks. Just a comfort break for those that need to use the loo and things. So to take us through the short break, I didn't manage to talk to Phil beforehand, but we've got Cory Band's "Wake Me Up" video, which is a bit of comedy gold, I think, for our sessions. So I'm going to treat you to a couple of minutes of that. So go and make yourselves a cuppa and whatever else you need to do, and we'll see you in a couple of minutes.
I'm not sure I thought that joining Cory Band was ever
called Living the Dream.
There we go. That's good fun. Oh, and I think the band looked like they'd had fun doing that. Do you recommend conducting with a banana then? Great. Well, I think most people will have been out and come back. So please do carry on, Phil.
Okay, no problem. Right. So the kind of most time-consuming part in the rehearsal, I'd imagine maybe 90% of the rehearsal will be yeah, I would say in terms of problem solving, there are actually two challenges that will need to be overcome, and that's the short-term problem solving. But then also, if you're working with a band longer term, then you've probably got in your mind that you want to try you don't specifically need the horns to play in tune at letter C, you just need the bands to play better in tune generally. So those are much more two levels. One, specific to the piece that you're playing, and two, more kind of institutionally. So you might want to try and change the regime or change the culture of the particular date. The date is the performance of that piece, or the longer term aims to improve your band in certain. That sounds obvious. How do you do that? Well, you just, as a conductor, you listen in rehearsal. That's the main way of working out where the problems are. Again, sounds really obvious, but I go back to what I said before, listening is so important. Some problems, however, you can preempt in the planning stages. You can look at a passage on the score and think, uh-oh, that's going to cause some problems. So identifying those problems is the first step to solving them. And the second step is solving the problems. I was actually just going to end the webinar there and walk off and say thank you very much, take a bow. But I probably need to give a bit more detail than that. It's definitely not as easy to do as it is to say that. Easier said than done. So how do you solve the problems? You as a conductor, you need to be very specific and clear in communications. In other words, your use of language, and this is so that the players also understand what the problem is. I mean, I've seen a lot of examples where the conductor is trying to solve one thing, but the players don't really know what the problem is, so they can't really have that kind of joint effort. That's a fault on the conductor's part, because the conductor hasn't been specific or clear enough in defining what the problem is. So that's what that means. Again, what I've said before, go back to encouraging the players to listen to themselves, being really aware of things so that they can hear the problems themselves. They don't need to be told what the problem is. They develop this kind of awareness as a musician that there is a problem there and it needs to be solved. And I think developing that awareness and getting your players to listen is definitely something you can put into the category of a long-term aim, a long-term challenge to get on top of. Once you've done those two basic things, you need to do, as a conductor, you'll need to try some practical solutions. And I'll go into this in a bit more detail on the next slide. So, for the conductor to say, right, okay, trombones, you're not together in that bar there. Can you do it better next time? For some bands it's enough, but for other bands they need a bit more help than that. So not just generally stop, that's no good, do it again, stop, that's no good, do it again. That's not really kind of solving the problems. It's not really offering solutions, I should say, really. Use your superpowers to get the best out of people. These are your what I called earlier the Jedi mind tricks, your people powers, how you relate to people. It may be that problems can be solved by using a particular tone or particular words with a particular person, which might be inappropriate to use with someone else just because of the type of person they are. And also you have to be aware as the conductor of what the mood in the room is. So, if you're persevering with a solution to a problem, but people are getting kind of, antagonized by it or impatient, then as a conductor, you need to be able to read that and react to it and maybe try something different. So that's what I mean by your superpowers. And the other thing, the last thing here is don't expect all the problems to be solvable immediately. Some problems you know, then they're not solvable after a single comment from a conductor. They're much more kind of complicated than that. So it might take you 2 or 3 rehearsals to solve particular issues. It might take you I don't know, even longer than that. I can remember a band I was working with some years ago now, and one of my longer term aims was to try and get them to take a much less aggressive approach to every piece of music that they came across. And I used to say this, or words to that effect, pretty much at every single rehearsal. So they were hearing it throughout a 2-hour rehearsal twice a week. And it wasn't until about 6 months had gone by, really, without any risk of exaggeration. It took 6 months, really, for me to actually hear any difference without having to actually say it. So, you know, that was a good learning experience for me, that particular problem, because it took such a long time to actually make any headway on it. So don't think that you can solve everything overnight. And finally, for problem solving, is make sure that you highlight and celebrate the problems that you have solved, because it's really easy as a conductor to forget to do this. But if you've been working on something and it goes and you get it right, and then you get it and then it's right from then on, or more often than not it's right, don't forget to tell your players that. So you know, increasing this sense of achievement is again part of the role of a conductor. And often you players see conductors as, well, you're going to stop the band and tell us what's wrong with it. But there's nothing wrong with once in a while actually stopping the band and say, the reason I've stopped is to tell you that was brilliant. Right, now let's go again. It very rarely gets done, but I think it's a powerful tool. Trevor Carter has just asked a question. Have you ever really lost it in rehearsal? Lost your rag, I assume he means. Have I ever really lost it? Maybe. The point about losing it is, I think the more often you do it, the less effective it becomes when you do actually do it. And there's a lot of times where I've sort of pretended to lose it, but I haven't actually lost it for effect. But there was one time I can remember losing it in actuality, but I try not to. Hope that's enough detail to answer your question, Trevor. Cheeky question. Right, let's move on to the next slide. This is the second one on problem solving, because I mentioned the fact that you need to have certain strategies, because the truth is, lots of times, no matter what piece of music you're working on, it's going to be the same problems that come up. So it really pays as a conductor to develop your own kind of bank of strategies that you can use to solve these problems as they come up again and again. So I've made a list of 3 issues which come up time and time again in all kinds of bands, and I'll just share my strategies for dealing with them as well. So here's the first problem that might come up. The band can't play a passage because it's too technically difficult. Okay, so certainly in the contest arena, this is a situation that will come up very, very often, you know, because contest pieces are designed to be difficult. So the strategy for this that I use is slow practice. There was a time when I was less experienced, where I was a bit embarrassed to do slow practice actually with the players. I mean, I regularly do really slow practice with Cory Band. You know, some of the best players in the business, and we use this technique all the time to learn technically difficult passages. And when I say slow practice, I mean like really slow, embarrassingly slow. So if you've got something that's really fast, say crotchet equals 150, then rehearse it at crotchet equals 50, not like 130 or something like that. I'm not talking about that kind of slowness. I'm talking about absolutely drastic slowness, so you can really learn the detail of every single note. Again, I'd love to be able to show this to you in reality. So slow practice, and then gradually building it up. I have on occasions actually used the metronome in the band room, and in my notebook I've noted how far we've got in a rehearsal, and at the next rehearsal then I'd start from there and build it back up. And over the course of some weeks, you can actually solve that problem by just doing it in increments. The other solution for if players, literally can't play the passage, it's beyond their capabilities and they've practiced as much as they possibly can. Sometimes you need to divide that passage between players. This does require some preparation from the conductor, because it basically means that the conductor will write out 2 separate parts for 2 separate players, and after both players have played it simultaneously, the effect is that one player is playing it fluently. So this is a technique that a lot of bands use all the time, but it requires some preparation from the conductor. You can't do that on the hoof in rehearsal. So that's the first problem that I have strategies for. Second problem in rehearsal, passages not together. Again, I'm sure lots of you out there will recognize this as an issue. One of the most useful strategies for dealing with this, in my opinion, is to instill a culture of subdividing the beat. So in other words, when the band is counting, say, 4 beats in a bar, the band is not counting 1, 2, 3, 4, but the band is counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Because in effect, what you're saying to yourself there is twice the tempo, there's far less chance that you're going to be going wrong there. It's much less of a game of pin the tail on the donkey. There's a lot more accuracy involved onto where you're going to actually be putting the notes. So it's impossible for the conductor to actually tell whether players are subdividing or not, but that kind of message reinforced over time is a really good way to get the band to play much tighter together by subdividing the beat. Another part of my strategy for passages that aren't together is to tell players, make sure that you tell the players what they're actually listening for. So it's no use saying, oh, those bars aren't together. Be more specific. For example, look, in this bar, the horn should be moving to the same note as the euphonium, or at the same time as the euphonium, or something like that. But actually tell the players what the problem is specifically, what they're trying to achieve. Now the horn and the euphonium players can listen. They know what they're trying to achieve. A little trick that I use a lot is highlight to the whole band what the problem is. This isn't together. Let's take the first note of a hymn tune. I used that example earlier. Right, we'll play the first note of the hymn tune. Here we go. Ba-da-ba-da-da. That's okay. That's not together. Then you say, right, okay, folks, that note's not together. Can you do something about that? Do it again. And ba-da-ba-da-ba-da. Okay, still not together. Then you'd say something like, can you hear everyone that note's not together? And you look around the room and some people will be going, oh yeah, I can hear that. And some people will be sort of going like, well, I don't know. That's not my job to listen and to say whether it's together. So, but then you say, right, well, in that case, let's do that again. But this time listen and see if you can see whether this note's together or not. Here we go. And ba-da-ba-da. We're still not together. And then you say, right, so did you hear that time that's not together? The whole band's nodding. Oh yeah, we heard there was a problem there. Yeah, right. Okay, so what are we going to do about that? Let's try it again. 3, 4, ba-da. Okay, well, that was a bit better, wasn't it? But was it perfect? Oh no, the band's shaking their head. So, involving the band in this process themselves, rather than just dictating on high, you've got to do this, you've got to do this, but actually involving the band and sort of franchising the band in the process that's happening and spotting this problem and solving this problem. When you're talking about something as simple as not together, in my experience, it works at all levels. It really does. Even a non-musician can hear the difference between ba-da and da. It's really simple. So that's my strategy for passages that aren't together. What about this problem? A note or chord is out of tune. This is in no way as simple as playing together, playing in tune. It's completely different skills, a very, very high level skill. And these are the strategies I've got. Alternate valves or slide positions for the trombones. Conductors need to know these from memory. So for example, if a player's playing a note on a first valve and it's flat, the chances are you can usually put your third valve down as well and play the note on 1 and 3, depending on what the note is. It will make it sharper. So that's nice little tricks you can have in your tool bag as a conductor there to make a very instant kind of solution to a problem. Also, getting players to swap parts over in a section as well might solve the problem. What I would really advise on this, though, is just be really careful in your use of the T word. The T word is tuning, because the moment the word tuning comes out of a conductor's mouth in rehearsal, a million alarm bells ring inside people's heads. Like I just said, it's nothing like the request from a conductor for players to play something together. To play it in tune is so more kind of multi-layered and of such a high level skill. So the tuning thing is something that I think you can only really solve habitually over a much longer period of time. And what I do in the short term, if a chord is out of tune, is rather than use the T word, I'll actually use words that are much more easy to understand, like balance, for example. I'll say, look, second cornets. I might be thinking in my mind, oh, second cornets are out of tune, they're a bit flat. But I might say, right, second cornets, can you just balance up, play a little bit louder in that bar there? They'll play it again. And then as a conductor, I'm thinking, well, actually, that's much better. So I've sort of solved the problem, but I haven't mentioned tuning. I've told them to play a bit louder, even though, you know, that wasn't why I picked up the problem, but it has solved the tuning thing without sort of frightening the horses, if you see what I mean. So those are some of the strategies I use for problem solving for particular problems that come up. I'm going to start going a bit faster now. Right, the positive end. This is simple, because at the end of rehearsal, when you've gone through your process of problem solving, finding something positive to comment on, or some praise as your final words, is a great end to the rehearsal. Even if it's been a terrible rehearsal, you can say something along the lines of, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, you've really tried hard in that rehearsal and I appreciate your effort and I look forward to seeing you next time. And then you get back in your car and think, what a terrible rehearsal that was. But, you know, the people need to know that they haven't just wasted 2 hours or an hour of their life. So something positive to comment on to finish. It's in everyone's interest to make people think they've achieved something. If they come rehearsal after rehearsal and they don't think they've achieved anything, they're less likely to come to the next rehearsal. One thing you can do positively is encourage people to do their own preparation for the following rehearsal. And also to look forward to it. So if you've got some plans you might want to reveal for the following rehearsal, we're going to look at this piece, or we're going to start looking at this piece, or we're going to do this or that, then it all helps with the sort of positive end to the rehearsal. So that's the fourth element of running a great rehearsal. And finally, then, the last point. This is the last slide now before we go on to questions. The reflection. Really important part of the process, actually. So I came up with the wrong order. Yeah, recording rehearsals is something that I do a lot, and this really helps with my reflection. So I do it as a matter of routine, and I've got a little Zoom recorder, and it's just filled up with sort of random recordings of the band playing this, that, and the other, just so I can have a listen to it in the sanctity and peace and quiet of my own time and my own home, and just kind of, you know, so I haven't got 30 pairs of eyes kind of looking at me wanting an instant decision. So as part of the reflection, you need to ask yourself, did you achieve those objectives that you set out? If not, why not? Were there times in rehearsal where, you know, you could have used a better word or a better phrase or a better tone of voice as a conductor? I know certainly pretty much every rehearsal I do, I can afterwards think of ways I could have phrased things better or done things better. Is it a case that you didn't achieve the objective because you haven't allowed enough time to achieve it yet? So does it just need a bit of patience and persevering with the same sort of attempted solution that you're trying? In other words, do the same thing next rehearsal and see where you're getting. Or in fact, did you not achieve your objective because it was the wrong solution? So do you need a different approach? These are the things which you can only really kind of get to the answer to when you're having this reflective process after the rehearsal's finished. You also want to keep an eye on what the big picture is looking like. by which I mean it's very easy in rehearsal to kind of get very involved with a specific piece or even a specific note on a specific page. But with the conductor, if you're a regular conductor of a band, then you've got bigger things. For example, will the right pieces be ready to perform at the right time? Because you've got a concert or a contest or what have you. If you've got some general points which you're working on with your band, can you yet notice any changes that I mean, I just gave you that example a minute ago where it took me 6 months to get that particular band to think in a much less kind of aggressive mind frame of every single piece they came up against. So those are the sort of more big picture thoughts that you might have on reflection, which might kind of dictate what you do next time. And finally, how are you going to then develop things in your next rehearsal? This is the fundamental question, really. So you start thinking about your plan for the next rehearsal. In other words, you go back to the start of this 5-point process. You go back to number 1, plan, 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 and plan. And you rinse and repeat, and you do it over and over again. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is my opinion, based on my experience of how you run an efficient, competent, and in some cases even fantastic and great and really enjoyed rehearsal. So I am really, I'll stop sharing my screen just now. There we are. I'm really happy. We got so many brilliant questions, all really, really relevant. Some people, lots of people asking the same kind of questions. So we're going to go over to the audience now, and we will bring in our first questioner. So Alex, are we ready to go with this?
Yeah, I've just asked Chris to switch on his camera. So Chris, hopefully you're with us. Oh, you're muted. Let me unmute you. There you go. Hi, Chris.
Hi there.
Hi, Chris.
Hiya. Hiya.
What's your question?
It was just to keep sort of players' interest during rehearsals. What's your sort of thoughts on that when you're rehearsing the test piece night after night after night?
Well, don't do that for a start.
Some of us have to.
Yeah, I know. No, well, we're in the same boat as well, believe me. The reason I've taken your question is because it is absolutely key. Because as a conductor, your job is kind of a conduit, really, between the music and your team of players in front of you. So it's I mean, you can't do your job as a conductor unless you've got everyone on side, which means everyone's kind of engaged in what you're doing. And I mean, I kind of touched a bit earlier on this, how I believe it's really important at the start of rehearsal to get everyone kind of playing and involved so that they feel they've got their kind of hand in the game, if you like, that sort of thing. But in terms of keeping everyone interested throughout the rehearsal, it's incumbent upon the conductor to make sure that the plan has that interest kind of baked into it, so that you're not saying, right, we're going to do a hymn tune for 5 minutes and then we're going to spend an hour and 55 minutes doing between letter A and B of the test piece. Because I mean, that's an obvious example, but you know, sometimes it actually you might want to chuck in a couple of other concert pieces, even though maybe they don't even need rehearsal, but you might think that your rehearsal of a test piece will benefit if you do, for example, two segments of 50 minutes. So you'll do a hymn tune for 10 minutes, then you'll do 50 minutes on, say, the first movement of the test piece, then you'll do a couple of concert pieces just to kind of refresh people's minds and what have you, and then you'll go back to the test piece at the end of the rehearsal, and you'll finish off the rehearsal with that. So you've done again 80% of the rehearsal's been on the test piece, but you've kind of mixed it up a little bit. But the other thing that I'd say, Chris, is that, and I mentioned it a little kind of briefly earlier, I find in rehearsal one of the things that I have to be really aware of is what the mood in the room is, and this is something that you can't really plan for, and I think your question is very perceptive, because you know you clearly are aware that there are times when you think there are people in your rehearsal who are losing interest or not engaged or something like that, and so I think if you build that into your kind of toolkit as a conductor to make sure that you've got that awareness all the time of what's actually happening in the room and what the mood is, and you know, what people need. We don't usually take a break in Cory Band. We don't really need to, but there's been a couple of occasions where things have got, you know, quite intense, and I've just thought, you know, let's go outside for a couple of minutes. You know, it's just take a breather. Not planned in any way whatsoever, but just my kind of reading of the situation in the room.
I think the perfect example of that, I did Cloudcatcher Fells a couple of years ago, and the opening 2 or 3 minutes of that it's only 20-30% of the band playing it, and it's really, really hard. And I just found myself thinking, God, 3/4 of the band haven't blown a note for like 5-10 minutes. They must be really fed up.
Yeah, and I can, we just recorded Cloudcatcher Fells just before the lockdown, actually, so I know exactly what you're talking about. But I played second horn with Sun Life Band on Salamander at the British Open in whenever that was, another John McCabe piece.
Something or other, yeah.
I think the first 10 minutes of the piece on second horn, and I had something like 7 notes. I counted them. And this is the British Open, I know exactly the issue. And the other piece which I've come across, which is really, really challenging for that, is Fireworks by Elgar Howarth as well, which has got long periods of the piece where, you know, a lot of the band just aren't playing a single note. The answer to that is sectionals. You've just got to plan in sectionals. I mean, there's no point doing the beginning part of Cloudcatcher Fells, which is basically all cornets. Once you've got past the introduction part, there's no point anyone else being in the room, to be honest with you. So just do an hour's sectional with the cornets. Tell everyone else they can do an hour's home practice or whatever. Call them into rehearsal an hour later. Because you're absolutely right. You just do not want to be rehearsing that piece or anything in that situation with a whole swathe of the band sitting there doing nothing. You're spot on. Yeah,
thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Okay, no problem.
Cheers.
Right, let's go to the next question, Alex. We got 2 people asked the same question, actually. I don't know who you've got there. Is there anybody there? Okay, well, so there doesn't seem to be anyone there. I'll ask the question myself then, unless someone comes and interrupts me. The question.
Sorry, Phil. Cliff has just arrived. Sorry, I was speaking and I didn't have my mute off.
Okay,
so Cliff is with us.
Okay.
Hi, Phil. Yeah, thanks for that. And also thanks for tonight. How do you stop people chatting in your rehearsals?
Right. Good question. And the question was asked by Ron Stinson as well. So thanks for that question. Right. Good question. The answer is, I think if you'd say people talking is a problem, then going back to the talk that I just gave on you know, how to run a rehearsal, let's add that to the list of problems that need to be solved, right? So not all problems in a rehearsal are musical problems. This is, I don't know, social problem, should we say? And if it's a problem for you as the conductor, then it's a problem. Some people have, you know, higher or lower tolerance thresholds than other people, don't they? So the answer is, you need to again come up with a strategy to tackle that problem. And I would say in this particular case, this is one of those issues which is something perhaps longer term to fix. So if it's really important to you to have no chatter in rehearsals, or at least keep it to the bare minimum, then the band need to be aware that that's one of your hobby horses, that's one of your things. And they need to know why as well. So I've mentioned that a few times, you know, making sure that the players understand what the issue is as well. So, and once you've identified that as a group, as an issue, and remember, you're the conductor. So if you say it's an issue, it's an issue. No one can argue with that. If people do argue, then that's another issue you need to look at solving. But let's say that, yes, you've identified that chatter in rehearsal is an issue. Then you need to set some kind of long-term objectives to solve that. It may be that you can solve it much quicker than you think, because most people would agree that you can be more efficient in rehearsal and everyone can enjoy it more if you keep that chatter level down. And then as the conductor in the rehearsal, it's then up to you to reinforce that message time and time and time and time again, maybe 10 times every rehearsal. Let's say you do 2 rehearsals a week, that's 20 times a week for 10 weeks, so 200 times, and then your message might start finally to get through. So I think the regime that a band has in rehearsal is really important for the efficiency of those rehearsals, but there's no part of that regime which is outside the control of whoever's leading the rehearsal, in my opinion. So if people are perennially late and you want to make that an issue, then that's something you can solve. There's one really memorable example where I was observing someone's rehearsal at the start of rehearsal, and it was absolute chaos. It was the time for starting rehearsal had been and gone. There were people wandering around. The level of chatter was through the roof. I mean, people were really shouting at each other across the room. The conductor was standing in the middle with the baton up, and I was thinking, what is this? And then, unbelievably, the conductor kind of shouted at the top of his voice. He just shouted, a 1, a 2, a 1, 2, 3, 4. And in the time he'd taken to shout that, everyone was in their seats and everyone played the first note of the piece. And to this day, I have no idea how that actually happened. And that certainly wouldn't be the way I choose to start a rehearsal. But that regime of that happening has all come from the conductor. He or she has allowed that to happen, or wants that to happen, or controlled that to happen in some way. So my answer to you, Cliff, is to, identify that as a problem, make sure everyone knows it's a problem, make sure that everyone knows it's a problem that you want to try and solve, and then invest your time and patience in, reinforcing the message. And it's my belief that you can solve it for sure.
Thanks for that.
No problem at all. Is it just out of interest, Cliff, before you go, is this a problem that comes from your experience, or are you asking for a friend?
Of course, asking for a friend. But yeah, it just drives me round a bend sometimes. Like, we're rehearsing a passage and I stop to work that passage, and immediately you've got players yakking, and I'm thinking, like, for God's sake, like, give it a rest, talk down the pub. That's what the pub is there for.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we have players in Cory, I know, who talk to each other during rehearsal only about musical matters, really, and they know that the rule in the Cory band room is you can talk about musical matters as long as no one else can hear it. And also, if you're talking to someone to your left or right and the conductor addresses you, then cease that conversation and listen to what the conductor's saying. But all those are rules which, we've instilled in ourselves in Cory Band to happen, and other bands can definitely do the same. And I guess the problem is particularly might be particularly an issue with young players as well, who are kind of really excited or excitable. But young players are probably the more open to taking rules, anyway, through that sort of developmental period anyway. So yeah, good luck, Cliff. Thanks very much. Right, Alex.
Right, we had 7 questioners for our next one, although the person I had lined up has literally just disappeared. So I'm just going to see if we can get Alistair Greenlee on the call.
Okay.
So this was asked by Colin Randall, Alan Grace, Dave Walker, Andy Crosland, Chris Weldon, and Catherine Heelan. And hopefully we've got Alistair here to ask a question. Hi, Alistair.
Hiya. Can you see me?
We can.
It's looking very dark.
Hi, Alistair.
You can see and hear me, yeah? My question really is following on from the previous 2 questions. You've just touched on it as well with young people. It's how do you keep the interest of a wide age group and a wide experience? I have in my band quite a few empty seats because we're trying to rebuild, but I also have some 10-year-olds, 14-year-olds. I have an 81-year-old and I have a 76-year-old. keeping that interest of all that wide age group? How do you
do it?
Tackle that one?
Yeah, and as Alex said, very popular question asked by no less than 7 people. So yeah, it's obviously a really good question. So thank you, and thank you for posing it. And I think, you know, the situation that you described there of having, you know, players as young as 10 or as old as 81, and lots of different experience and probably lots of different ability as well is not an uncommon situation, I would say. So definitely of great relevance. My answer would be twofold, really. Number one, it's got to be planned, hasn't it? You can't. There's probably not many pieces you can kind of just open the score and find that it's suit the lineup and experience of players that you've got. So I would imagine that you use some of the more kind of flexible brass series which have beginner parts at various pitches and clefs and what have you in there. But even if you don't, still nonetheless, it does require extra planning and preparation on behalf of the conductor to make sure, A, that someone's got a part in front of them which matches their ability. It's, you know, it's a challenge for their ability. It's not too much of a challenge that it will put them off, but it is something that they can kind of get their teeth stuck into, so that you can concentrate on everyone kind of equally in rehearsal. So that's definitely the first part, is planning to make sure that your material is differentiated to the ability that we've got. And, you know, that just takes a little bit of time, a bit of research of what are the scores out there that are going to work with your particular group. I mean, let's take the red hymn books, for example. They're a good example. They are a very, very flexible series of pieces, which will kind of suit all sizes of band and all abilities of band. You can mix and match parts. You know, it's all clearly marked on the score which parts are the same as the other parts. And, you know, that's a very simple example, but there are, you know, dozens of examples of flexible music series out there which aim to address this particular issue of diversity in the band room. So that's the first point, is make sure that you've planned well enough in advance that you know that the part you're giving to the player, or the part that they've been practicing, is suitable to their ability, and definitely easier said than done. But the second part is more kind of reactive in rehearsal as well, and it goes back to the point I was making a moment ago about kind of reading the mood, because sometimes, you know, with young players, let's say your 10-year-old's got ants in his pants, and, you know, he can't sit still, for example, and, you know, you're rehearsing something with your 81-year-old, which you think is a good challenge for your 81-year-old. In fact, it is a good challenge for the 81-year-old, and he's enjoying the time that you're spending on him in rehearsal. But then out of the corner of your eye, you can see Herbert there, 10-year-old Herbert, messing around and kind of starting to lose concentration. Then in a reactive way, it's part of your job to keep hold of the rehearsal, to make sure that you in some way engage what he's doing over here. Sometimes you can do that quite simply by just suddenly changing the tone of your voice, a kind of a shock. That's the technique which I use a lot with young players, or suddenly singing an instruction in a dramatically operatic voice, because, I mean, young players find that just mesmerizing and will stop them in their track, something completely unexpected. But you could also involve them in the process that you're working on with the 81-year-old. You could, for example, say, okay, that was great, let's do it again, and this time, Herbert, I want you to listen to this, and I want you to give some feedback to the 81-year-old. I'm talking hypothetically, obviously, and just kind of engage the person that way. So their job is not to have their instrument playing, but they've got another job now. Their job is to listen to that player and come up with some kind of constructive, or perhaps you don't even want them speaking, so perhaps you can say, we'll let Jack play this part, and when he's finished, I want you to say whether he played loud enough or not, and then afterwards you can turn to young 10-year-old and say, so did he play loud enough? And it's either a nod or a shake of the head. So it's a closed question, and that avoids talking unnecessarily. So that's the second part of how I'd answer the question, really, is that you need to be very aware of the mood in the room, and you need to react to things that you think are happening in the room in terms of people's interest drifting in and out, engagement with the rehearsal, and do what you can at the time to make sure that everyone kind of stays on focus. So number one, differentiate the parts and make sure people have got a part in front of them that's suitable. And number two, try and sort of micromanage any issues that come up in the band room as and when they come up, using some of the techniques which I just started to talk about.
Mm-hmm. I have to say, if I started singing a phrase or something I once said, I'd get lynched in my band. But
well, have you ever tried it though? So yeah, I mean, so you know, my point there was just something unexpected. So if you just, you know, just clap your hands or just something to bring people's attention back who might be wondering.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so yeah, loads of people asked a very similar kind of flavour of that that question. So thanks for that. I hope that little discussion has sort of helped in some small way. Should we move on, Alex?
Yeah, unfortunately, our next questioner is not here, so I'll ask. This was Steve Critchlow's question. He wanted to know, do you have any tips for working on music pieces that certain members of the band openly dislike?
Right, yeah, good question. Do you have any tips for working on music pieces that certain members of the band openly dislike? I mean, my initial question to Steve would have been, why are you working on those pieces? And I would have been interested in his answer. It's a shame he's not here, because he might have said, oh, I don't know. Because I mean, the point about a brass band is it's their hobby. People go there to enjoy themselves. So if there's a piece that the band doesn't like, then don't play it. Now, Steve might have said to me, oh yeah, but it's a contest piece. It's been chosen for us. We have to play it.
Interestingly, in his question, he says certain members, so it might be that it's just one or two players that don't like a certain piece.
Yeah, okay. Well. Yeah, fine. Understood. So let's say you've got a test piece, which, you know, most people kind of just put their heads down and get on with it. And certain people are kind of vocal about not thinking it's a masterpiece or something like that. I mean, I come across this situation a lot. At the top level of the championship section, we are sometimes given pieces to prepare, which, well, perhaps I better end that sentence there. Actually, I don't want to incriminate myself too much, but you basically, as a conductor, then you have to take on the role of salesman. So you have to sell this music to your players. I mean, you have to, for a start, you need to look really deeply into the music and try and find something that there is to love about it. I mean, even if it's something obscure, like, you know, you like the way it sort of paces from beginning to end. I mean, that's not really something that's kind of obvious on the tin, but it could be something. You know, if there's a story to the piece, you might do some background research and find out things about the story which aren't necessarily written in the score, but nevertheless you might be able to pin that on just to kind of pique the player's interest a little bit. But basically, yeah, as a conductor, you need to be a salesman. You need to be positive about it. You basically just need to make that, in a contest situation, you basically need to make that piece sound as polished as you possibly can. And that is going to require the players to be taking care and consideration about the way they approach the music. So that's the way to deal with that. Obviously, if you're right, it's a shame we can't ask Steve, but let's say there are one or two players that are vocal about this, then you may have to, if the problem persists, you may have to take them aside between rehearsals and explain to them, you know, what you're trying to achieve in terms of the positive image of this music, and just, you know, come to agreement one-to-one that they're going to kind of pipe down for the general benefit of the band. So if that was the situation, then that's my advice there. Okay, let's go to the next question. Question 4.
Okay, so next up we have Fiona Casewell, who just started up her video now. If you're there, Fiona. Hi, you're on mute, so I think you can unmute yourself now. There you go. Hi, Fiona.
Hi, Fiona.
Hi.
What's your question?
My question is about how far you take rehearsing a small section of music. Say, for example, if the front row can't play a section of music, and I generally just a few times and then I move on. And sometimes I think I'm being a bit too nice, and maybe I should push it further. But I've been playing in bands, and some conductors will go until the thing is fixed. I mean, you've addressed it slightly earlier, but I was just wondering your opinion on how push players.
Yeah, really good question. I mean, you'll not be surprised to learn that my opinion is that you need to judge the mood in the room. I mean, I've said that a number of times, haven't I? And it is really, really important. And again, in relation to any plans that you might make in terms of time, you might decide that you want to push a point, say 5 minutes longer than you were going to, but then because you've got so much else to do, you might decide that on grounds of time you're going to move on. So you might decide, on grounds that everyone looks like they're going to kill each other, that you might move on. You might decide on grounds that you've actually spent too much time and you've got other stuff to do, you want to move on. So there's a sort of a variety of factors through there, and that is where I would say the importance of that reflection part of the process comes into it, because you'll just bookmark in your mind if there's something that you've had to move on from and you haven't solved the issue. You'll just bookmark that in your mind, and when you do your reflection, you're planning for the next rehearsal, you'll be like, oh, that didn't work. And the sort of situation that you're explaining might be an example of where you might reflect that I was trying to solve it, but people were kind of getting impatient. So is there a different way I could solve it? I mean, often the solution to the problems is the players need to practice their parts, which is
yes, exactly.
You might conclude as a conductor, well, there's nothing I can do about this. The players just need to practice the parts. But in actual fact, I would argue as the conductor, if the players aren't practicing their parts, then you need to try and increase your efforts of inspiring them to practice their parts somehow by using your conductor's toolkit. So there isn't really a hard and fast answer, but those are a few of my thoughts.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, no problem. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Fiona. So our next question, I'm afraid, is missing as well. So this was from David Sewell, who wanted to know, is there a golden ratio between playing and talking?
Yeah, and the reason I included this question in is because I think there's a simple answer to that. So the question is there a golden ratio between playing and talking in a rehearsal? And to be perfectly honest, I think the golden ratio is 100% playing, 0% talking. Obviously, that's not going to happen ever. But the point about saying it as starkly as that, I think, is that you, as a conductor, you need to keep your verbal communication to an absolute minimum, both in terms of the words you use in each sentence and also the number of times that you actually open your mouth in the first place. If we could control everything through gestures or eyebrows or eyes or mouth or what have you, then we could keep the music playing and just solve things like that, but we can't. But yes, I mean, I would say do as little talking as possible. And in that spirit, let's move to the next question.
Great. So next up we have sorry, I've just lost my notes. So Abby Peters is on the call. I don't know if Abby can speak to us. Abby, can you are you there? Oh, hopefully Abby can start a video now. Hi, Abby. Oh, sorry, you're muted at the minute.
Hello, Abby.
Hi, good evening.
Hi.
I think you've probably answered a lot of the question, really, and it was more from the player's perspective in terms of what to do to really raise our game and make it a genuine performance rather than we're just playing it. I mean, other than practicing it at home, arriving on time, being in the frame, in a good sort of mindset when we arrive, and obviously following your directions and your objectives, or trying to put that. Just is there anything else that you'd be looking for?
I really loved your question, Abby, when I saw it written down. You wrote, what is my part as a player in making a great rehearsal? And Francis Ashworth asked the same question as well. Is there anything I can do or contribute as a bandsman to help make a rehearsal great? And I really liked where that question came from, because as I've said a few times, a rehearsal is absolutely a collaboration. I mean, I guess it depends on the conductor. For some conductors, a rehearsal is a one-way street, and it's just, you know, information coming out of the conductor. But that's not the way I do it. In my experience, a rehearsal is absolutely a collaborative kind of process, which isn't to say, you know, players are jumping in saying, oh, I think that should be long, or I think that should be louder or quieter, or what have you. But I think the fact that you've even asked the question means that you're already thinking about it, which is great. My advice to any other players to play your part in making a rehearsal great is invest in it. If the rehearsal starts at 7:30, then make sure that you're there on time, and you're in the right mind frame to start rehearsal on time. Make sure that you've done the preparation in between rehearsals. Make sure you've got the right music. Make sure that, as come up, you're not chattering through rehearsal. Make sure that you stay focused and concentrated, listen to what the conductor's saying to you. This basic kind of investment in the rehearsal process is really important, and I think it's one of the things which I appreciate most about rehearsing with the Cory Band, actually, is the fact that all of the players make a total and utter investment in every single rehearsal that we do. You know, they've all got day jobs to do during the day, but they'll all know in their minds that when it comes to the evening, their focus is on that rehearsal. So they'll move heaven and earth to be there on time. We start at 7:30. Most people arrive from about 7:15 and do their warm-ups and what have you. And usually we can start rehearsing at 7:25 because everyone's sitting there and ready. They're that invested in the process. And for a conductor, that is just like a gift from heaven, really, to find a group of players that are so invested in every aspect of the process that needs to happen. So that's my answer to you, really. But like I said, the fact that you've even asked the question in the first place shows me that you're pretty invested in it. So well done.
Okay, thank you. If you're aware that other people in the band don't share that sort of vision, it is incredibly frustrating to sit and observe the MD sort of having to manage this situation. It's awful, and it just seems, it's such a waste of good rehearsal time. Yeah. Any suggestions as to how to, as a player, tackle that?
Well, you're getting way too controversial.
Okay, sorry.
No, that's all right. I could see the hesitation in your eyes before you even dared to throw that question into the mix. No, it's a brilliant question. It's a really, really good question, and I think to answer it, I would again go back to what I've said a couple of times about, in terms of the problem-solving process in rehearsals, there are problems which are kind of local to the piece of music that you might be rehearsing, and then there are other problems which might be more kind of institutional in relation to the direction of your whole band, and the issue you raise might fall into that category. In which case, the only real way you're going to kind of get on top of it is just to open the conversation at an organizational level about what you want out of your hobby. I mean, all of you. Certainly, I know we sort of operate on a slightly different level at Cory Band, but there is a sort of an unwritten contract of people that come into the band, and we say, look, before they even join the band, we say, we do this, and we do this. If you can't commit to doing those things or to enter into the spirit of those things, then we're not the band for you. There are other bands which might be happy with that, but in terms of our band, this is how we do things. So if you're in the band, then you invest in it, and if you don't want to invest in it for whatever reason, then find a band which which allows you to be how you want to be. So I know that, I don't know whether that's helpful or not, because, you know, like I say, I know we operate on a slightly different level, and we demand that of our members, and it's not, you know, lower section bands can't go around demanding things of people, because, you know, you wouldn't have a band left. But it's a difficult conversation, and, you know, if it's something that you think is worth addressing, then you know, I would encourage you to raise the issue at committee or band meeting or AGM level or wherever.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, excellent.
Right, good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So next up, we've got Eddie Baker, who's got our next question. So hopefully Eddie is with us. Just need to switch your microphone on, Eddie, and you're with us.
Hello.
Hey, Eddie.
Hiya, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, I'm very good.
Good. Yeah, a question on maybe getting a new piece out for your band. Obviously, as a conductor, you've done your homework yourself and looked at the score and studied the score. Could be the first time the band have actually seen the piece. What would be your process in rehearsing it? Would you try and run it through with all the warts included, or would you do sections at a time?
Right, very good question. The answer would be no different to any other piece, really, in as much as before I even attempted to do any rehearsal on the piece at all, I'd have a good idea in my mind what I wanted the final outcome to sound like. So, you know, when the music is, you know, straightforward, as it probably is in the lower sections, that might not take as long as it sounds, but I do always try and have some kind of formed idea in my head before I start any rehearsal process at all. Now, the likelihood is with a 4-section band, as soon as you hand the parts out, which I would advise you to do the rehearsal before you're going to do it, for obvious reasons. I mean, it might not make any difference to some players, but at least the players that want to have a look at it beforehand can have. But the likelihood is you'll bring the baton down and it will sound a long, long way from this kind of ideal image that you've got in your mind. So to directly answer your question, what I would do for the first few times anyway is just, like you say, run the piece from top to bottom, so people get, you know, you might have this idea in your head and you are the only person who can see all of the instruments on the page in front of you on the score. So it's really important for people to start investing in the process of bringing this piece to a great performance, that people get to know the piece. So I would, to use your phrase, warts and all, just get through from beginning to end of the piece, maybe once, twice every rehearsal. Strategically, I would start to map out a few things in people's heads. So it's not just a matter of, right, let's run the test piece, and then 10 minutes later you finished it. Oh, okay, let's run the test piece again, and then do it again. You might run the test piece and then say, well, I think, you know, I've looked at the piece. I think there are 3 points in the piece where we can play a really loud and tremendous sound, but only 3 points, and highlight where they are. Yeah. Pencils in rehearsal, really important. So get the players to, you know, put a sign on the part in these 3 places, and get them used to the idea that they're only going to be allowed to play with full power on these 3 places. I mean, it's not a big detail, but it's an important kind of milestone in the player's journey through learning this piece. And then the next time you run it through, you might say, well, this passage here is, you know, a cornet solo followed by a euphonium solo. So I want anyone who is playing the accompaniment to play less than the dynamic that's written in these places. And then, you know, they write it on their part. And so, you know, you're never rehearsing anything in great detail to start with, just these big run throughs, but you're starting to sow little seeds of what the week are going to involve. And then generally what I do with a test piece then, because I do that with Cory as well, exactly the same thing. Okay, yeah. We're probably over the course of about 3 weeks as opposed to 3 months, but so it's all sort of, you know, a bit quicker. And then as time goes on, then you start to get into more and more detail, and you might concentrate on just doing one movement of the piece or one part of the piece in rehearsal, but to more detail. Ultimately then, as we've suggested on 1 or 2 other moments, some sectional rehearsals are really great to get right into the nitty-gritty detail. And then as the contest approaches, then you pull right back out from the detail and you start to look at the big picture again, because that ultimately is what the adjudicators are going to be hearing. So you need to be listening with adjudicators' ears, which then you're probably not listening to the, you know, individual detail of whether John's going to play the, you know, the F sharp on second valve, or whether Jane's going to do it on baritone on first and second. The adjudicator's not really interested in that. They're interested in how the big picture on how it sounds. So that's the process that I go through, whether it was for the fourth section or the championship section.
Okay, yeah, that's brilliant. Thanks very much.
Okay, good luck.
Thank you.
All right, so Alex, we've got one more question queued up, which I'm happy to take.
Yep, so I think Gareth is with us. Hopefully, Gareth, you're just muted, Gareth. There you go.
Yeah, hello.
Hi, Gareth.
Hello, Phil. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, you okay?
Good. My question, basically, you started the rehearsal off, everybody's warmed up, you're a few minutes in, let's say 10, 15, 20 minutes in, and it's not up to the band's usual standard, whether that's, you know, they're not playing it as well as they did the previous rehearsal, or just in general, it's not up to their standard. What sort of strategies would you use to try and lift the standard of the rehearsal, whether that's lifting the players or just generally, you know, getting that attitude back to being what they would normally give?
Good question, and definitely one which I, and I'm sure all of the other conductors watching, have faced on a number of occasions. Well, again, like I said to a few other questioners earlier, the fact it's the awareness that that's happening, first of all, is obviously has to be taken as read. So as a conductor, you need your eyes, ears, and all your senses open at all times, so that if this kind of, you know, below expectation quality is coming from the rehearsal and something needs to be done, the first really key step in the conductor's mind is you need to recognize that that's the case. I think that comes probably from, again, the institutional standards that you are setting for your group, both in terms of, you know, we've talked about people chatting in rehearsal and bringing pencils to rehearsal, and that flows through into, you know, the quality of music that you expect to happen in rehearsal. So if you've been working on playing the first note of a hymn tune together, for example, for like 2 years, people know that you expect that to happen. And if it doesn't happen, then that goes onto the list of problems to be solved. In specific answer to your question, what I would do is just level with the band. In a previous question, someone said, "What's the ratio of playing to talking?" And I said, do as much playing as possible and as little talking. But I find what's really effective, if there's a point that really needs driving home, like this one, stop conducting. I mean, at Cory, we do very, very pacey rehearsal. So it's either the band's playing or I'm talking. There's hardly ever silence. I guess that's probably deliberate on my part as well, so that when silence does appear in the room, everyone knows something major has happened. So put the baton down on the stand, draw a breath, just go into that silent moment, and that silence is, in my view, much more effective at getting everyone's attention than shouting something, just doing the opposite. So silence, eyeball everyone, look around the room. If there's a message to deliver, and again, like I said earlier tonight, make sure you're looking in the player's eyes when you deliver it. And if the standard is below standard, then that's the message you need to deliver somehow. And you know, I can recall numerous occasions at Cory where this has happened, and I've not sort of tried to beat around the bush or been diplomatic. I mean, polite, obviously. Well, maybe not obviously, but yeah, polite, and just say, look, guys, here we are. We're in this band, whether it's Cory Band or whatever band. We've got certain standards, and over the last 10 minutes, I've been listening, and you know, you haven't met those standards. And again, the technique that I was mentioning earlier in the night as well, I would kind of involve the players as well, and I'd say something along the lines of, I'm sure a lot of you also can hear that this is not up to standard.
Yeah.
which is a great thing to say, because then as a conductor, you can then look around the room, or not even, you don't even have to look around the room, but you will get an awareness of who's nodding their head. In other words, how much support you've got for this line you're taking.
Yeah.
Or who's not, who's not. I mean, generally, if you say it diplomatically and politely, then you'll have the room with you. But that's a good way of monitoring whether you have or not. And then once you've delivered your message directly without beating around the bush, then it's just a matter of kind of restarting and trying again. I mean, sometimes for whatever reason, it's irretrievable, isn't it? You never get it back.
Yeah, it's just going to be one of those nights. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. It's one of those
Yeah.
nights. In which case, if you've got the luxury of being able to finish early, then do what you can, but just knock it on the head and try again next time, because it does. It happens, doesn't it? And I've come out of rehearsals and thought, I really messed up that rehearsal. I was terrible. I didn't say the right thing at the right time, and so I count myself in this dipping below quality thing as well. It's all part of the learning process, really. But I would say, address it directly at the time. I think if you're not the shouty type, which I'm generally not, then I tend to use kind of silence as my call to attention, rather than sort of losing my rag or anything like that. It's pretty effective.
Okay, thank you.
So see what you think. Are you a shouty conductor, or do you deal in silence?
I think I'm more the silent but deadly type.
I like it. Silent but deadly.
Thanks for that, Phil.
No, it's all right. No, it's the same approach you'd use in a classroom with kids as well. As to get their attention, if they're talking and what have you, you just stand at the front of the room and just widen your eyes and just look around and wait. Even if it takes 10 minutes, wait for the last person to be quiet, and then you've suddenly got that pin drop silence into which you can drop your well-considered message.
Cheers.
All right.
Thank you.
Good. Great. I've not been looking in the Q&A, Alex.
We've got a few Q&As. I wondered, while you have a quick look at some of the questions, we had a poll that we didn't manage to get in earlier about conductors' pet hates. I wondered, should we see what the conductors on the call think?
Yeah.
So we've got a poll here for everybody where we want to know, what are your pet hates as a conductor, whether that's latecomers, last-minute absences, lack of practice, having to repeat the same things, chatter in rehearsals, no one having a pencil, or yawning. So we'll see what people think. I have to admit, I'm a terrible yawner whenever I play, and I can't help it. It's something about deep breathing makes me yawn. I don't know what it is.
Dear, you sound like a nightmare in rehearsal, Alex.
It's not because I'm not interested or engaged. It's just and I've always been that way. If I play and I'm really breathing deeply, it triggers me to yawn every now and then.
Yeah,
I don't know if anyone else finds that. So most people have voted now. So let's have a look at those. So we've got last-minute absences. That's the biggest pet hate.
Yeah.
With what were the next ones? We had having to repeat the same things in a second place, and then joint third, lack of practice, and latecomers.
You're safe with the yawning, though. Look at that.
And chatter in rehearsals, and no one having a pencil was second last, and nobody being bothered by yawning. Is yawning one of your pet hates then?
They're all my pet hates. All of them,
Great.
Without exception. Can I just say about that's an interesting one. What's come out top there is last minute absence, which I assume means in a lot of cases finding out about the absence in the last minute. Not that a player is like intending to be at rehearsal and at 29 minutes past 7 something comes up and they have to go. Now I know that happens sometimes, but what I assume is the issue there is not finding out about absence until the last minute, in which case again, I would say if that's a problem, not finding out until, you know, so you're sitting in rehearsal and you know, is John coming to rehearsal tonight? The word goes around, people are looking at each other. I don't know, I haven't heard from him. Has anyone heard from John? No, I haven't heard from him. And then John never turns up. So I would say, again, at an institutional level, a group level, if that's something that bothers you, then make up a rule. Say, if you're not going to be at rehearsal, we have this at Cory Band. Anyone who's not going to be at rehearsal, they send a message to me, to my mobile phone. No one else. They don't tell someone in their section. They don't tell the band manager. No one. It comes straight to me. That's the rule. So I can keep, you know, a good track of if anyone's going to be there or not going to be there. So if the answer to that poll, last minute absent, means finding out about it last minute, even though the player has no intention ever of being in rehearsal, then you can do something about that. Just an interesting thought. I'll just go through some of these Q&As briefly, and then I'll leave you to discuss in the pub. Anonymous attendee. Do you share your plan and objectives and get the band to reflect afterwards? This is good with youngsters as they get it in school too. Good question. Sometimes I do share the plan and objectives. So sometimes I'll say at the beginning of rehearsal, we're going to do 3 pieces tonight. Can you get them all ready on the stand now so that we don't waste time going through? I mean, that's enough of sharing a plan. As I already said, I mean, so that players understand the issues you're trying to fix is really important. So sharing the objectives of what you're trying to do there as well is really important. But sometimes, you know, you don't need to share that much detail. But yeah, absolutely. This collaboration is a word I've used before tonight about the rehearsal. And I agree, yeah, youngsters get that in school, don't they? And they get lots of sort of individual kind of self-reflection tasks to do after every piece of work. So that's something that you can address in your rehearsals, in the summing up of the rehearsal. Good question. Nigel Birch says, when having, no, hang on, that jumped. He said, do you do your reflection the day after, or do you leave it a day and come back to it fresh? Good question. Don't really know the answer to that, Nigel. I mean, as soon as the rehearsal finishes at 9:30, my reflection starts, and it doesn't really end until 7:30 on the next rehearsal night. So it's just happening all the time. I mean, I get your point. I think some decisions or some conclusions are best left after you've slept on it. So if you think something's a great idea when you've just got home from band, it's probably best to get, you know, have a night's sleep and see if you still think it's a great idea in the cold light of day the next morning. So that's my answer to that. Stefan van der Wilt, a couple of questions from him. He says, out of curiosity for Cory's working ethos, can you give a few more examples of the band rules over there? Cory Band rules. Yeah, I mean, we've basically got 3 rules in Cory Band. Rule number 1 is you've got to come to rehearsal completely prepared. So you've got to play brilliantly all the time. So that requires a fair bit of background work. Rule number 2, you've got to be committed. So every time we have a rehearsal, you've got to be there. If you can only make 9 out of 10 rehearsals, then, as I said before, there's probably a band close by which will accept that, but not a Cory. And number 3, you've got to be a team player. So sometimes myself and the band management will make decisions about the band which are for, you know, the good of the band, even if they're for good or bad of individual people. So you've got to take that on the chin, and you've got to understand that there's something, the institution, which is bigger than any one individual, me included. There is the band, which is, you know, the most important part of every equation. So that's pretty simple. Those are our 3 rules. If you want to play by those rules, come and join Cory. If you can't handle it, there'll be another band for you. Just scrolling through now, there's more and more coming in. Andy Crossland, like many bands, we're attempting distance banding recordings as a poor substitute, the poor in brackets, as a substitute for the real thing. Any tips for this special kind of piece prep? Oh, Andy. I mean, yeah, there's no getting away from it. You can do as many distance performances as you want, but I mean, the one Alex played in the break tonight, I'm absolutely cringing listening to that. I mean, you will never hear Cory Band play worse than that. It's just terrible. So there's only a certain standard that you can reach in these performances. I have to say, the majority of the improvement that you may have been able to detect in the Cory Band performances is because of the great skill being acquired by our video editor. So he's really sort of learning how to blend the parts better together. You know, how to, you know, we're learning better how to record as well. I guess that's a good thing. So, you know, what we tend to do is record the piece separately to the video. So send the video editor a video file where you're miming, and an audio file which could be on a different device if it's got a proper microphone in, for example, like a Zoom recorder. But you aim for a better sound quality, because if you record a video and audio on your mobile phone, that is often a recipe for a terrible recording. If you've got a forward-facing instrument, face it away from the microphone of the phone, otherwise it will just distort beyond belief. We had trouble with the upward-facing instrument sounding too soft in attack as well. So I'm not really sure how they're doing that, but I know we've experimented with putting the microphone up on a high shelf, sort of above the bell, so the bell's going more directly into that as well. So these are the little things that we've learned, but the bottom line is, I mean, there's just no substitute for live performances there. So the sooner that we can all get back to doing that, the better. And as I said right at the beginning of the night, fantastic to see that Norwegian band Wrong Brass doing that all together in the same room at the weekend. Really good. So there's two more here. I'll do. I've just seen Cliff's question there. Can I give Philip Harper's mobile number for my players to contact in case of their absence? No, you can't, Cliff. Anonymous attendee again. Do you think it's important to keep a line between you and your players, i.e., you're not there to be everyone's friend? Yes, I do. I do think it's important. I mean, I've sort of learned as I've gone through my conducting career how important that is. I mean, it's difficult. It's really difficult because you spend a lot of time with people, and you know, certain people you have an affinity with them as a person, and you'd like to be their friend, and in some cases, you know, you are their friend. But it always pays to remember, for me anyway, that I'm there as a professional, and so ultimately every relationship has to have a sort of air of professionalism to it. But you know, it's difficult when you share a car with people, for example, and you're sitting for a long time in the car, and you might not be talking about band, you're talking about things that friends talk about. When you're on a tour or something, you're sitting on a bus with a bunch of people, it's difficult. So yes and no is the answer to that, but mainly yes. And Mark Arnold, the final question: what do you think about doing a DVD or a presentation like this again, but with a band, with set up scenarios to make your points? Yes, Mark, that's something that we could do. Or in fact, we could do what we were doing before lockdown, which was to take this workshop on artistic direction all over the country and do it with live people and a live band, because that's what we all want to be doing, isn't it? So yeah, absolutely, that's what we want to do. Well, that's been a bit of an epic session, so sorry for talking for so long, but as I hope you can probably gather, this idea of making a great rehearsal is something that I'm really invested in. I'm really passionate about. I think it can make a massive difference to people's skill as a conductor, because it can make a massive difference to the effect they have on their bands as well. So I really hope you've managed to get something out of this session at whatever level, and I hope you found something that you can take forward, some ideas you can take forward into your band rooms to you know, increase the value and the fantastic enthusiasm that you can get from everyone for the rehearsals that you do. So thank you all very much, and good luck to you all.
Great, thank you very much, Philip. That's been another really great session. So I'm just going to do a quick wrap up, ladies and gents, and then we'll be off to the BBE pub. So if you haven't joined us there before, really encourage you to come. We have great discussions each week about what we've been talking about or what's going on in the brass band world, grab yourselves a drink and come and join the conversation. So I've just lost a part of my notes. So I'm just about to share my screen with you, and then we can go into that. So there we go. So the thank you very much again, Philip. We do a feedback form for each session, which I'm about to share to those on the Zoom call, and my colleague will be sharing it on the Facebook feed. We do really want to know how you're getting on with these sessions, what you find interesting, what you'd like to see improved, and you can also send us your ideas for future sessions as well. And I've had a couple come in this week, so we'll be looking at those. We probably will have a short break from the sessions in a few weeks, but we will be bringing them back as I think they've been going really well, and people seem to be really enjoying them, and we're enjoying putting them on as well. So thank you for that. Next week we have Chris Holding, who's a really brilliant trombone player that not many people in the brass band world will be aware of, but he's going to be talking about preparation for auditions and solo performance, which is it's taking something from perhaps more of a classical world, but there are real skills that we can learn for the brass band world in there as well. So registration for Chris's session will open up next week, and I think it will be another interesting evening. So please get involved with what we're up to at BBE. You can take part in our contesting survey, which I'm about to share the link for, which is we've had a huge number of responses for the contest survey so far. We're up to the 5th part at the moment, and we'll have the 6th part next week. I think next week we'll have it out anyway, and so that's going on at the moment, and we have just launched our Brass for Brass competition, as I said at the start. So this is our new free monthly competition. There's prizes there to be won, as well as your band's entry into for membership of Brass Bands England. So if you follow that link, you'll be able to go and enter. And again, I'm gonna pop that link into the chat for those on the Zoom call. So if you go there, we've also got a really exciting day with Philip McCann for a band that Philip has promised his time for a day to Philip McCann, that is different Philip from tonight, to go and work with a band. Philip is a brilliant band trainer, as well as being a wonderful cornet player. So the day that he's proposed is a set of workshops, some time with the band, and potentially a small concert as well. So if you'd like to have Philip come to your band, you can bid for his time with all the money going into the Brass Bands Emergency Fund that we're currently running. So to do that, you need to get your entries in tomorrow. It's a closed sealed bid auction with a minimum bid of £250. So if you'd like that, please send that in to info@bbe.org.uk. And also, brilliantly, our insurance partners, New Moon Insurance, have pledged to match fund the next £500 worth of donations into the fund. So for every £1 that you donate, not only will we be able to claim gift aid, we'll also be able to have £1 added. So it'll be £2.25 for every £1 that's donated at the moment. So if you've enjoyed today, it's all been free, and we'd ask that you donate into that, and all that money goes directly to bands struggling in the crisis at the moment. So please do go and put what you thought today was worth into the fund as well. And I'm going to be putting that link into the chat as our final link of the evening. So I'd like to say thank you again to Philip for today's sessions, and I think Kenny would like to just say a few words to finish off the evening.
Yeah, thanks, Parky, and thanks, Phil, for another great session. You know, illuminating as always, and I'm sure we all share your sentiment for this is all very well, but we can't wait to get back to actual banding and do the thing that everybody really wants to be doing, and doing it live. So, but thanks for a really terrific session. Thanks also to Parky for being in charge as always, and to my other colleagues, Sarah and Rosie, I think, who has had an early night tonight. I think she was struggling with her internet connection. But thanks to them for keeping everything going there behind the scenes as well. And of course to our funding partners at Arts Council England for making all of these sessions possible. Loads of great stuff coming up in the next time ahead, of course, as Alex was saying. We've got Chris Holding next week, who's a terrific educator, really world-renowned as an educator, and anybody interested in looking at the way they do their solo performances, their approach and editions, really will do well to have a look in next week and see what Chris has got to say. He's a terrific bloke who I've known for quite a few years now, and is very, very talented. So we're all looking forward to that and much more to follow. So I think without much else to say, Parky, we'll say good evening to our friends on Facebook, and we'll continue the discussion in the usual manner.
Great. Well, thank you to everyone on Facebook. We'll say good night now, and we'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.